Christmas and New Year's are right around the corner, and if you're looking for a dish to bring to a holiday party or something to serve at your own holiday party that's going to appease both vegans and omnivores alike, then you're gonna love the dish I'm making today. So for these appetizers, I am going to be making some crispy wonton wrapper cups. I'm gonna be filling those with a teriyaki tofu, covering that with some cheese, a little bit of crushed peanuts, cilantro, green onion, and finishing the whole thing off with a wasabi cream sauce. So first thing I need to do is get my tofu ready because that needs to dry out. You could actually use any protein. If you wanted to actually use some sort of vegan chicken, you could. I was thinking maybe even cauliflower. There's a lot of ways you can go. I'm gonna go tofu. It's my personal favorite protein right now, so that's what I'm gonna be using. So I'm gonna be cutting up this tofu into slices, and the reason for this is that I'm going to be grilling it similar to how I made my sofritas. If you want to check out that recipe, I'm actually just cutting these strips a little bit smaller. I've cut it into quarters, and then I'm cutting those quarters into thirds. And I'm doing this actually before even draining the tofu at all, so that I can drain the tofu a little bit quicker by having it in thinner slices that I sandwich between two towels. So I don't really know how many I have here, but I'm just going to be laying these out. And I've also just put this towel on a baking sheet so I can easily, wow, did not work out perfectly, so that I can easily remove it from the surface while I use this surface to prepare some other items. So the recipe I'm making today, which I'll have linked below, makes 24 individual cups. And the next step I'm going to be making are the wonton wrapper cups that everything else is going to go in. Now you have to be really careful because in most grocery stores, the wonton wrappers or the gyoza wrappers have egg in them. Normally though, at Asian supermarkets, you can find them that do not have any eggs. So just keep a lookout. The brand I have is actually Dynasty, but even at Whole Foods, even at Sprouts, things like that, in the section right next to the vegan food where they have the wonton wrappers, normally those have egg in them. So I'm going to show you how I prep these, and then I'm going to be throwing them in the oven. So I have all of my wonton wrappers here, as you can see, and I'm going to be cooking a dozen at a time because I only have one muffin cup sheet. I also have a little bit of olive oil here in a brush. Now it's really important that you do oil these wonton wrappers. They will not crisp up and get the consistency that you want if you do not add oil. They tend to get a little bit chewy. So just in order to make this process easier, I'm going to be taking one out, adding the oil, and then just putting another one right on top of it, oiling that one up as well. So I'll do this for the 12, and then I will add them to the cups. So they're all oiled up, and I'm just going to be placing them into the cups and just using 2 fingers to lay them in there, making sure that the sides stick so that they don't collapse. Some of them may collapse, it's not a big deal, you can still stuff them, but it's all right. And just do this for the remaining dozen. Because again, this recipe makes 24, I'll have to do this 2 times. So I have these wonton wrappers all oiled up, stuffed into these cups, and they are about to go into the oven at 350. I already have my oven preheated. They're gonna go in there for 7 minutes, which is not going to cook them fully. It's not gonna brown them, but at least it'll make them solid so that you can fill them. They'll brown up when we put them in a second time. So while those wonton wrappers cook, I'm going to be assembling the teriyaki sauce. Now, you could use, I guess, a store-bought teriyaki sauce. I find it doesn't have the sweetness or the weight that I think it really needs for this dish, so I'm gonna be making my own here. I've got all the ingredients measured out. I'm just gonna throw them in. Again, the recipe fully is down below, so if you want all the measurements, just go ahead and look down there. So there's brown sugar, soy sauce, about a ½ cup of each. I have about 2 teaspoons of ginger and a teaspoon of garlic. This is 2 tablespoons of mirin, some red pepper flake. Gonna add just a few toasted sesame seeds, a little bit of sesame oil, just a couple of drops, and just about a ¼ cup of water. So I'm gonna stir this together, and then I'll be placing it on the stove. So I'm gonna put this pot on the stove, probably to just about medium-low heat. I'm going to be bringing it up to a simmer, and then I'm actually gonna be adding a little bit of a cornstarch slurry to it to thicken it up in just a bit. My wonton wrappers have been in the oven 10 minutes. I'm going to take those out right now. Like I said, they're not going to be brown at all yet. The browning process will happen later, but you can see that they're firmed up and I probably shouldn't be doing this with my bare hands, but just want to set them onto a drying rack or something so they can set aside. These will hold for a while. If you're going to be maybe making this, making these steps ahead of time and then maybe assembling at someone's house, take it to this step, let these cool completely, and then put them into an airtight container, and these will travel so that you can assemble these somewhere else later. So the tofu is dried out. I'm going to be taking the towel off, placing it in a pan, and just browning it up. So I'm just gonna put this on medium high maybe. I'm just gonna place the slices in here. If your pan isn't big enough to hold all these, you can do it in a couple of batches. We're just trying to get it really nice and brown, and similar to the sofritas recipe if you've seen that one, but also kind of similar to the banh mi recipe. You want a crispness. This is going to make sure that when we add the sauce later, when we cook it later, that the tofu has some texture, that it's not just completely soft. So we're gonna be getting it nice and golden brown. Looks like about all I can fit in here for right now. So I'm just gonna let those brown. As you can see, actually we have to skip over here. My teriyaki sauce is bubbling up quite a bit. I'm gonna turn it down to low, and I've just made a slurry with a couple teaspoons of cornstarch and some water. And I'm just gonna add this. This will make this a little bit thicker, and it will also make it nice and glossy. This should thicken up very quickly. Teriyaki sauce is thickened up nicely. You can see these nice thick bubbles on there. So what that means is I'm just gonna turn it off, let it set aside until I need it. I got a little bit of impatient with the tofu, didn't want to do it in 2 batches. It's gonna be okay here, so I just stuffed the rest of them in the pan. But they just need to brown up on one side, and then I'll flip them over. While they do that, let's make another sauce. The teriyaki sauce is done and just hanging out. My tofu is browning, just about ready to flip over. And now I'm going to be making this wasabi cream sauce, which actually is going to be cashew based. So I'm gonna be using this magic bullet. It's not that much of an amount, so to put it in a whole Vitamix or bigger blender, it's just more of a mess to get it out of there than it is to wait the extra time it's gonna take for this to grind up the cashews. But I have here a ½ cup of cashews that have been soaking. It's really important that they're soaked so that they blend up nicely in a blender that isn't so high powered. So I'm gonna throw all the ingredients in here and blend it up. So I have my ½ cup of soaked cashews in here. To that, I'm adding 2 teaspoons of wasabi powder. You could use pre-made wasabi. This is the one that I'm going to be using. 2 teaspoons is perfect for this, for me, for my heat level. It actually just has more of a wasabi flavor than it actually has heat, but if you're afraid of the heat, obviously add a little bit less. I'm gonna be adding just about a teaspoon of lemon juice, and this is some pre-squeezed lemon juice. I'm adding a little bit more than a ¼ cup of water. I'll have to check the texture after it's blended for a while to see if that's enough, but it's usually about a ¼ cup plus maybe about an 1/8 of a cup for a ½ cup of cashews. Now I'm gonna be adding a secret ingredient in here, which is just a bit of cilantro. And I'm adding this bit of cilantro in here to create some green color. Now this sauce isn't gonna be green. This wasabi doesn't really have that green color you're used to. So by adding a bit of cilantro to this sauce, it's going to give you that color. Let's blend it up. So I've stopped it so I can check the texture of it. It looks like it's blending up pretty well, but I think it's just a bit too thick. Yeah, as you can see, it's a bit thick. So I'm gonna add probably just about maybe an 1/8 cup, not too many, maybe just a couple tablespoons of water. And I'm gonna put the lid back on, making a bit of a mess here, and blend this up for just a few more minutes. So I actually want to give this a bit of a taste also. The wasabi comes through, The acidity's there. I'm gonna add actually a teeny bit of salt. I think it could use a bit of salt here. Just to help bring out the flavors a little bit more. But it's pretty much done. Texture's great. All right, there it is. Just gonna let it set aside while I finish up my tofu. Tofu is browned on one side, so I'm just gonna be flipping this over. I didn't use any oil. You could have used oil if you wanted. It might make it brown up a little bit more, but look at that beautiful color. And the texture is really nice and crispy. So what I have here on this cutting board, some green onions, some cilantro, and some peanuts. Now I'm going to be chopping these up actually before I finish the tofu because I want to use the white parts of the onions in with the teriyaki tofu portion, and then the green parts and the cilantro and the peanuts are, excuse me, going to be sprinkled all over the top of the final product. So I'm just going to slice these up now. So I had about 4 green onions. I chopped up the white part just into little discs here. I'm gonna put these in with the tofu. This green onion, cilantro, and peanut, this is all gonna be sprinkled over the top of everything when we're finished. So let's continue on with the tofu. Tofu, as you can see, is browned up nicely on both sides. And so now I'm just going to break it up. Actually, it looks like it's a little bit firmer than I want. I'm actually gonna take it out and chop it up. So it just got a little bit firmer than I had expected, which is great. Actually, this is gonna be better for the final consistency. In some of the tests I did, I was able to break it up easily with this little spatula thing, but looks like I'm gonna have to cut it, which I'm not mad at. I was looking for a way to get it a little bit firmer, and it seems like maybe cooking them just a little bit longer gets that consistency. So just gonna chop it up. All right, so I'm just gonna stack these up. Makes the chopping a little bit easier. And I want them to fairly small pieces because they are gonna have to fit into these cups. So I'm trying to get them as small as I can. Tofu is all chopped up. I'm just gonna throw it back into the pan. What needs to happen now is it's going to be mixed with a bit of the sauce, and I'm actually going to caramelize some of that sauce onto the tofu so it absorbs, and then I'll add some extra sauce onto the top just so it stays nice and wet. So the pan is back onto a medium heat or so, and I'm gonna probably add maybe about half of the teriyaki sauce that we made into here. The idea is that I want to coat the tofu with the teriyaki marinade, let it soak up a little bit because that tofu got nice and dehydrated pretty much from all of the browning. So I want it to absorb this teriyaki sauce, and I actually want it to get even a little bit more color with this sauce on here. So I'm gonna let it cook a bit and let it caramelize, get some of those sugars browned up, and just keep an eye on it. We don't want it to burn. Just make sure you have a non-stick pan for all of this because it's gonna help make your life a lot easier. So the tofu is pretty much done. That sauce that I add has been absorbed. It is caramelizing onto it, so I'm gonna turn it off. I'm gonna add just a bit more of the sauce onto it, and that way it stays nice and flavorful. And I'm just gonna set this aside and we're ready to assemble. All right, so we're ready to assemble. I have 12, I'm just gonna be starting out with a dozen here. So I have 12 of those cups that we baked for 7 minutes. As you can see, they're nice and crispy, but not brown at all. And I'm going to be adding about a tablespoon of my tofu mixture to each of the cups. Now, if you use a tablespoon, you're gonna get, like I said, about 24 of these cups from this recipe. You could easily make more, be a little bit more skimpy on the tofu and make more, who knows? It's up to you. The last thing I'm gonna be adding here is the cheese. This is a vegan mozzarella cheese. You can use any of your favorite vegan cheese or omit it. It's up to you. But I add just a little bit here. Again, these are a take on an Asian nacho, so cheese is kind of a necessary component of that. My oven has stayed on 350 the entire time, and that's exactly the temperature these need to go back into the oven at. So I'm gonna put them in for maybe about 10 or so minutes. I'm gonna watch them. I just want the cheese that I put on here to melt a little bit and for the wonton wrappers to get nice and golden brown. It's been about 10 minutes, but I've kept an eye on these the entire time. You want them to brown, you want the cheese to melt a little bit, but you just don't want to overcook them. So here they are. Cheese is melted a little bit. It is vegan cheese, so of course you don't get the best melt on it. But as you can see, the edges here of the wonton wrappers have gotten nice and crisp, and the bottoms as well, as they cool just slightly, they'll all firm up. So it's time to garnish. I only made a dozen. Obviously the entire recipe makes 24. I'm just gonna be showing you how to finish them off with these 12 here. I put my wasabi cream sauce here into this little squeeze bottle. If you didn't have one of these squeeze bottles, pour it into a Ziploc bag, cut a tiny little corner off of it, and you can do the same thing to garnish. So that's what I'm gonna start with here is this wasabi cream sauce, and I'm just gonna do a nice drizzle. I'm still doing this on the baking sheet, that way that I can remove these later and put them on a nice serving platter for presentation. Green onion, which if you noticed, I forgot to put the whites of the green onion into my tofu mixture like I said I was going to. It'll all be okay. The green onion on top should carry a nice onion flavor throughout the entire appetizer. Going to add my freshly chopped cilantro over the top. Obviously, if you don't like cilantro, or if you're unsure about guests who do or don't like cilantro, you can just go ahead and serve it on the side or don't bring it at all. Last thing are the peanuts. This is nice for crunch, a little bit of saltiness, and it just brings the entire dish together. Beautiful. All right, here's our final product. Let's give it a taste. Everything in this works so well. If I had one complaint, it'd be that I want some more of that wasabi cream sauce on top here. Everything really comes together well. That tofu is such a great consistency. It's even got a little bit of a chew, and the sweetness from that teriyaki sauce balanced out with the hot wasabi cream sauce on top. It's so good. The fresh onion, the fresh cilantro, the peanut adding a bit of a crunch, even though, as you heard when I took a bite of it, the wonton wrapper, because I added that oil, has a great crunch to it as well. It's a really great appetizer. And if you're planning on taking this to a party, you can make the wontons ahead of time, make the tofu ahead of time, make the sauces ahead of time, bring everything to the party and assemble there, throw it in the oven for a couple minutes, you're done. If you can't find these wonton wrappers, like I said, they're a little bit difficult to find, the vegan ones that don't have any egg. Why don't you just make them as a plate of nachos? Just get some tortilla chips, use the teriyaki tofu, some cheese or not, make your own cheese sauce, cover it with the cilantro and onion and peanuts. You're gonna have the same idea, but without those wonton wrappers that, like I said, are just really kind of hard to find sometimes. So however you do it, just give this a try. All the ingredients alone are really great. Experiment. Jump cut. So if you like this video, why don't you check out my other videos as well. The way that I treated tofu in this by grilling it first and then adding sauce is the way that I made my banh mi. It's the way that I made the sofritas in a way as well. So check out those other videos. It's a really great way to cook tofu so that you get a lot of flavor in, plus it increases the texture. It's not just a gushy mess and kind of just a flavorless void. But check out those videos, check out my other videos as well, especially this holiday season. That cookie recipe is spot on. But subscribe, like this video if you like it. If you do make this video, or if you do make this recipe, take a picture, tag me on Instagram at monsonmadethis, and have a great week. Have a great holiday season. I'll see you next Monday with another video. And yeah, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Thanksgiving a couple weeks ago. I'll see you later.